Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What in the World. I'm so happy that I have all of you here with me today, whether you're listening on whatever form of media you like to go on. I have a very special guest with me today. This is Sean from Ineptitech.
Hi.
He is a great friend of mine, and he has helped me quite a bit, so I figured that I would bring him on here today and just have a nice conversation with him and talk about some of his skills and favorite things to do. So go ahead and introduce yourself in any way that you see fit.
Sure. My name is Sean. I have a company called Ineptitech. We do software development, specializing in web development and web design, but we do some other things. We've done some bots. So we did obviously your website, Gaia Comics, and the Earth Droid bot. And it's a ton of fun just to make these kind of goofy projects, and also some of the more serious stuff.
Right.
Just whatever comes our way.
That's awesome. So, real quick before we get into the conversation, if you are on YouTube, you can see there's a little record spinning in the top. That's going to be a thing that I'm going to be doing from now on. I'm going to call it the record of the week, and I'm just going to highlight something that I've been listening to over the last week, some new music that came out. This week we have the record Here for Now by Louis the Child. It's a fun little song. I thought that I'd give it it's a fun album. And I thought that I'd give it a shout out because I found their song Little Things, and it's like one of my new favorite songs. So go check that out, and then we'll get into this. So, Sean,
Yeah.
you are a web developer.
Yeah.
How did you get into doing something like that?
So the short answer is pretty much just hanging out with people who are smarter than me, and not being afraid to ask questions.
That's fair.
The long answer is I had some struggles in high school, and ended up going to a few different schools. But in the time that I was not going to high school, I was just learning these things on my own. I was learning about Linux and like system administration, and then a little later, I just got into web development and web design, and I just found it a lot more captivating because it's such an expressive medium. It's a very kind of direct and easy way to express an idea. And the advantage it has over something like, just drawing by hand or in Photoshop or whatever is that you have interactivity. You have, the computer, you have the keyboard and mouse and everything.
Yeah, totally.
So you can do, there's just so much more potential. And more recently, I've been getting into doing like 3D stuff, like 3D scenes. And it really is just like an endlessly expanding thing. Like you can do so much with it. So I guess when I first kind of found out how much potential there was for that, and obviously knowing that, web development and the web in general is always going to be growing. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
It seemed like a really good choice, both from kind of an artistic, expressive perspective and also as a kind of career choice. It just made sense to me.
Made sense. That's awesome. So you created Ineptitech, which is your business.
Yes.
Is it just you, or I know that you mentioned that you had like a team of people?
So I have a friend of mine who I guess I would consider my business partner.
Okay.
Legally, I'm the owner of the business, but I have a couple other friends as well who are part of the team. And whenever I need help, for the most part, I'm taking the lead on most of the projects, which is something I learned to do after some past bad experiences,
Right.
which I'll get into. But basically, just I found that relying on other people to do things for you is not going to work. Like if you're the one with the idea, you need to be the one to do it.
Yeah.
You're the one with the vision. You can't possibly communicate that and get people as interested in it as you are. So I usually take the lead on most of the projects, but I do have a small team of a couple other guys who help me out with stuff.
That's awesome.
From time to time.
So how long have you had Ineptitech?
So Ineptitech was officially registered this year,
Okay.
but we've been me and my business partner buddy, we've worked together on some projects. We did a game hosting service a few years back,
Cool.
and we've been kind of planning to do web development, getting into that. We just found that hosting is, it's mostly just having to deal with like customers directly. Like you have a bunch of people, especially in game hosting, it's like mostly kids, and it's customer support is not easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
Understand that.
we just figured like it's just easier for us to do things in house and just have control over our environment and deal with like one person at a time, maybe a couple.
Right. Okay. That's cool. Do you like what is what's your end game with it? Do you want this to become like a big business venture that you'll be able to evolve, or are you just kind of happy with where it's at now?
I have an acquaintance, a guy in Florida who has a company, and he does very, very well for himself.
Mm-hmm.
He just has, he has like an endless line of clients, and he just streams on Twitch, learning new languages or trying to figure stuff out. He's got a couple employees. He's got this beautiful office and like a super clean space with all of this hardware and equipment and everything he could possibly need.
Right.
And I kind of look at that as my go-to, as like my end goal. I just want to have an environment where I have all of the resources I could possibly need for any creative thing. If I need servers for some, crazy infrastructure thing, then I just want to have that on site. I can just go right in, and I want to have all these like crazy workstations, a couple employees,
right.
just for programming stuff. I also want to have a an electrical station like for soldering stuff, because I think hardware is a pretty important part of that. If you need custom, like there's a hosting company called OVH, which is pretty popular, and they actually have a lab where they build their own computer motherboards, or like they customize them. And they have their own like water cooling setup for all their servers. It's just super cool. Ooh. So a space where I can do programming or digital art, or have the servers, or build something like electrically, just have all the tools there and all the possibilities. That's kind of where I want to go with it.
That's awesome. And I know that you mentioned getting into like some like 3D modeling, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember you were streaming in our Discord server that you were updating the Dinosaur Earth Society's website and with the 3D dinosaur.
Yeah, so that actually just went live a couple hours ago. We moved over to the new site. Oh, awesome. And depending on who you ask, that is accurate simulated satellite footage. But no, he has a 3D model of a velociraptor that he sent me for something I was doing a while back when I was first working on his site. And I've been using this library called 3JS, which lets you do 3D things in browser. And that's kind of what I've been getting into with 3D scenes. And so it's really easy just to take a 3D model and load it in, and then just tell it like spin. So, and then you put a space background, and it's like it's orbiting or something like that. And it's really easy to do that stuff with 3JS. That's
awesome.
So I took a course on 3D modeling, I forget when, a number of years ago. And I've always been kind of hovering around like the game development space, and I've always been dabbling in it a little bit, but I've never actually published a game.
What do you use? Like, what kind of programs?
So I use Autodesk Maya. I have a student license for that.
Oh, cool. I also have Maya, but it's just sitting on my computer. I haven't done anything with it.
I'm not the best 3D modeler. I can do a little bit of it, and I know my way around the tools. But for the most part, as of late, I've just been using it like just open up a 3D model, put a texture on it, and then just export it or like optimize it or whatever for the web, just so I can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the website right now, and
Yeah.
it looks phenomenal.
Thanks, man.
It's very impressive. I'm and it's just like it moves so smoothly. I love the cursor as well.
The cursor, yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So would that be like what's your favorite thing that you've done with these skills? Like have you like websites that you've built or bots that you've built? Like what are some of your favorite highlights?
That's a hard question. I would I don't know. I mean, depending on how long you've been doing, there's like a curve. When you're first starting out, you're learning a lot of things and you're learning really, really fast. So 2 months ago, the most impressive thing you've made will look obsolete.
Okay,
because 2 months later, you've learned so much more, and you can look back. I mean, what I like to do is I'll have to-do lists on a sticky note or whatever, and for a little while, I'll keep them around so I can look back and see, like, this wasn't that long ago, but I accomplished all these things. I made all these really cool things.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have a whiteboard on next to my door that just I throw something on there, and then it sits there, and then when I'm done with it, I check it off, but I don't erase it.
Right. Yeah. So, even though I've been doing this for a few years now, it's if you just have to stay ambitious, and you're always going to be moving on. But to answer your question, I would say the current Dinosaur Earth Society website is up there. Yeah. I'd also say the character builder I did for you.
That's one of my favorite things. Just like I go on there and I play with it sometimes. I was on it today because someone posted something. They were like, "This is the most high definition picture of Mercury that you'll ever see."
Yeah. I saw that.
And so I didn't feel like opening up Photoshop, and I was like, wait a minute, I have a character creator that I could just hop on. So I just went out there and I downloaded the PNG that came out of the website, and it was so quick and easy, and it's really well done. Like I want to just continue giving you praise for that because of how awesome it works.
So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's really, really hacky.
Is it?
Like, it really is. So I don't want to get into like a ton of technical detail, but basically what it uses is called a canvas. And so like a canvas is not entirely unlike an actual real life canvas.
Right.
In the sense that if you paint something on there, you can't exactly erase it super easily.
Right.
So when you add, like if you add, the Dinosaur Earth face, and then you want to put on a mustache, and then you want to change the face, like you want to change it to a different one, like the flat Earth face, for example.
Right.
You can't just change that. If I throw it in there, it's just going to draw it again on top of what's already there. So what I actually do is erase the entire canvas and redraw everything every time you change something. And for that reason, it's fairly limited. Like, for example, adding multiple characters is just not going to happen. Being able to click and drag stuff around is just... So I wish I could have done more with it, but I'm still very, very proud of, I got it to work, and I think the design came out really well, and the whole thing works pretty smoothly.
I think so too. And it's and a lot of people really enjoy it. Like I know that there are people who still send me the like some of their favorite creations, and there's a Twitter account attached to that. Does that run off of the character creator? How does that work?
Okay, so I'm actually really glad you asked that question. So it doesn't, is the short answer. There's actually two completely different code bases that do the exact same thing. And so there's one, of course, for the website that's written in JavaScript, which is the language that browsers use.
Right.
And then there's another language called PHP, which is typically used on on servers. So if you need any like logic to your website that's not just in the browser, like a database, for example, is a pretty common use. Or like those contact forms, like an email form.
Okay.
Those are often written in PHP. All the developers listening to this heard me say PHP and close the tab.
Is that like
it's a little bit notorious, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But so the reason it is that way, obviously I guess maybe there is a way, but it wouldn't exactly be convenient to use the browser for the bot. So I basically rewrote the same thing, but completely differently in a completely different language to make the bot. And so when you go on your website, Mother Earth Comics, in the bottom right, there's that little icon which picks a random character to show as like the shortcut to go to the character builder.
Yeah.
That actually uses the bot code base.
Oh, okay.
They're both written in PHP. So if you were to open up the website code and you were to look at that, it's something like motherearthcomics.com/randomcharacter.php is the image. So the PHP script generates it and then sends it to you.
Wow.
And the bot works the same way, essentially.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I'm glad that I'm learning all of these things from you, because I love to show off the website, and I'm like, yeah, I know this guy. He has this company and he built it for me, and it's the coolest thing ever. And they're like, that's so cool. How did you get the planets to come out in a spiral? And how did you get the things to just be random in the corner, and how did you have the secret Easter egg that pops up? And I'm like, I don't know.
The Easter egg, yeah. I don't know.
Now I'll have this podcast, and I can just send them that link.
Send it
here
to them. Yep.
That's what it does.
Gotcha.
That's awesome.
So I mean, yeah, that's one of the things. Obviously, words. Obviously, I'm not an engineer. I don't have a degree, but there's sort of this engineering mindset of wanting to take this existing. You have these tools, and you want to see what's the furthest you can push the tools to do. Like, what's the craziest thing you can take, like that no one would ever have thought you could do? How far can you push it?
Yeah.
And so, like, a good example is that canvas thing, where it wipes it every time, and so there's kind of a line to be drawn where, like, at a certain point it just gets stupid and impractical. But it's really one of the driving. It's like if you tried to make your comics in MS Paint. I mean, like, yeah, I guess you could if you wanted to.
If you really wanted to. Yeah.
But on the other hand, some people make some really cool stuff in MS Paint.
Yeah, totally.
So it's kind of a line. To that you have to walk, but that's one of the things that I think that keeps a lot of creative people who are also technically inclined going, is that, like, you're always pushing yourself. You always have that ambition to see what's the furthest I can push this skill set, and you learn things along the way.
Totally. So how many websites have you fully developed?
I actually don't know off the top of my head.
Because I was taking a look at your website earlier, and there were some highlights on there.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people. I'm going to speak for myself. I have a server where I just upload all of my crazy experiments. And a lot of the time, they're not really fully realized websites. It's just a concept that I came up with while I was half asleep or stoned. And
I get that.
And you just come up with this idea that you have a picture in your head, and and I imagine you experience the same thing. And I imagine musicians do as well. You come up with a riff or some thing, and you're like, I wonder if I can do that.
Totally.
And the same goes for web designers and web developers. So I just have a server where I upload all of my kind of crazy experiments. Like right now I'm working on a personal portfolio that's based entirely on a 3D scene. So it's a table with a lamp and a laptop. And the laptop screen is actually a frame of another website. So it has like a few of my projects, and you can press keys and switch between the different screens. So it'll go like to the Ineptitech website.
Right.
And one of the things I did, the company that makes Quake ID software, is that them?
Yeah.
I think they released the source code for the original Quake a while back,
Oh wow, really?
and someone actually ported it to run in browser in a project called WebQuake, and it's really really cool.
Wow.
So what I did was I actually put WebQuake on the laptop in the 3D scene, so you can load up the website and you can play Quake on the little laptop.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Don't go to that on your phone on data. That's a terrible idea.
It'll just rip through.
You will get a crazy overage charge. But that's the thing, is that you get, like I said, that's what keeps you driving. You're like, I wonder if I can make this crazy stupid idea work.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So is that going to be like you said that it's going to be a portfolio, and are you still working on it, or is it
Yeah.
yeah?
So I can actually, let me see if I have it up here. So I just have a bunch of different folders with I mean, I can count, but it's probably dozens if not hundreds of projects. And like I said, they're usually not fully realized things. It's just a concept. Like on the Ineptitech website, this is a good example. There's those little, like you said, the little kind of features.
Yeah, the little windows to.
So I actually designed those. My dad is also a software developer, and I had him email me a screenshot of he works with Apple devices, so I had him email me a screenshot of his Mac desktop, and so I designed those little windows after the Apple windows.
Right.
And I put another one of those frames. So like your website's there, the Dinosaur Earth Society website is on there. And there are these little frames with a little bit of like an angle. It's a little skewed to kind of give it some perspective.
It's got a little shadow on it.
Yeah. And so I have, that started out as one of those experiments. I have a folder called OSX that I'm looking at right now. And all it is just, it's just one file with, and the screenshot of the Mac. And it was just, I was playing around with it and trying to make it work. And then I did. And I ended up using it for my company website.
That's awesome. I think it looks really great.
Thanks, man.
I see what is this? The Spam Dam?
Yeah, so that actually shouldn't be on there anymore. Oops.
Is that a website that
that one actually never got launched, but the idea was, so basically, we wanted to take email. A developer friend of mine, we wanted to take email and basically emulate actual mail. So the way we wanted to do that is block spam, and so I actually have to credit my friend Carl with the idea for this. The idea is basically you take a digital stamp, just like a real stamp that you would put on a letter,
right,
and you assign it to your email when you send it. And the receiving end says, okay, if this doesn't have a stamp, I don't want it. Just in the same way that you can't just put an unstamped envelope in the mailbox. They're not going to take that. So the same idea applies. You say, okay, it's $1 for 100 stamps, which is pretty cheap.
right.
But the thing is, those like advertising companies that send you emails, those have very little value. Like the price of those is going down all the time,
Right.
as low as something like a tenth or a hundredth of a cent. I forget the exact price off the top of my head. So what they're spending, what you would spend a cent on an email, you're already outbidding them by like 100 times.
That's
and it's a brilliant idea, and I'm a little disappointed that we didn't move forward with it. But
how come you didn't?
I think we just moved on to other projects. As cool of an idea as it is, you always have like the flashy new toy, and you're always moving on to the new thing.
Yeah.
And
That's understandable. That's a cool idea, though.
Yeah. Hey, if anyone out there wants to make it happen, look me up.
Yeah, I mean, after when you're looking at this, whether you're listening on Spotify or YouTube or wherever, there's going to be a link to the Ineptitech website or your Twitter or both or whatever. Like, I'll put
The
whatever
website
link
would be
on
good.
there.
Yeah.
Um, I also see the we don't support Internet Explorer.
Yeah, that one's fun. So, that website basically was born. I was in the Ineptitech Discord.
Mm-hmm.
I like to just complain into the void because no one in there ever responds to me, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I was working on. I was actually working on the character creator,
Mm-hmm.
and I was testing it in different browsers, and that's the thing about web development that can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
Is that as much as you want to express these really cool ideas, a lot of the time you're held back by things by accessibility and support for different browsers. You don't have that problem when you're making an iOS app,
Mm-hmm.
because you have like, okay, there are like 6 recent Apple devices. This is what I need to support, and that's it.
Right.
But in web development, you have to support phones, you have to support tablets, desktops.
Right.
You have to support, like, you have to optimize everything for different internet speeds. You have to, I mean, the list is endless. And that's not to say that optimizing things and making them accessible isn't important.
Mm-hmm.
All it is that it takes a pretty significant chunk out of your development time that you would, I'm sure, rather spend doing something much more interesting.
Yeah.
And so I just got really frustrated trying to make Internet Explorer work. It just fucking can I swear?
Yeah, you can. Go for it.
Okay. It just fucking refused to work. So there's a website called Can I Use, which is a pretty valuable resource for web developers. Right. And basically what it does is it tells you what different features of browsers are available in which browsers. Mm-hmm. So usually like Firefox and Chrome have the best support, and Edge is pretty good too. Right. And then you get into Internet Explorer and it's all red boxes. And I was like, well, I guess that explains it. And so I ended up just making a website called We Don't Support Internet Explorer.com, which lays out in clear detail why web developers shouldn't and won't support Internet Explorer. And it turns out Microsoft themselves don't actually consider it a browser anymore. They don't want you to use it.
I see that on there. I don't what's the point of it still being around? It says that it's a compatibility solution.
Yeah. So basically, in the days of the early internet, I don't have a ton of information on this, but basically, I guess there are some things that were developed specifically for Internet Explorer, a lot of enterprise applications.
Right.
So I imagine that takes the form of like management panels and like financial solutions, like billing stuff, I would guess.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things they've just been using the same code base for 20 years, and it was built on Internet Explorer, and it has just stayed that way. So they keep it around because Microsoft is all about backwards compatibility. This is what they do.
That's fair.
They support often to a fault. Like they still support technology older than most people using their software. And and I understand why. Like, they were the biggest corporation in the world.
Yeah.
But the reason that Internet Explorer is in that position is because back in the day, you actually had to pay for an internet browser. It didn't just come with it.
Oh, really?
And then, so I think Netscape was one, and I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, Netscape actually went out of business because Microsoft released a browser with their Windows operating system, and it's like, okay, well, why would I pay for this if it comes free with my operating system, with my computer?
Uh-huh.
So, and Netscape went out of business because of that, because you can't compete with Microsoft on that. So that's how Internet Explorer ended up that way, I believe. Nowadays, pretty much all of them are free. You'd be hard pressed to find one that does cost money.
Right. Yeah. Why would they charge it if there are like a million other ones that are free?
Exactly. So I mean, I imagine you can. I actually don't know of any that cost money off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
So nowadays, obviously, that model makes no sense, and that's why Internet Explorer is not preferable.
I just looked it up, and it says that uh, so Netscape was bought in 1999 by AOL, and
Yeah, that makes sense.
but they went out of business in 2003, and
Huh?
but in 2017, apparently Verizon bought um, Netscape,
For how
which
much does
I
it
don't.
say?
It doesn't say it, but it.
Okay, so follow-up question: why?
Yeah, I know.
What?
Like it's been a dead company for 14 years at that point. Why would they even? Why, why would they buy it?
Apparently, what the hell is it? LimeWire, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's LimeWire. I'm thinking of. Apparently, that brand is still in circulation.
Really?
No. It's uh uh the music piracy company. Oh my god, Napster.
Napster.
They're the ones. That brand is still getting passed around.
Really?
So I think like Verizon might have bought them at some point, and it's like obviously it's not the same thing anymore, but
Right.
people are still buying the brand off each other.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I like to. A lot of people don't really realize that like just how big like corporations are that are um just like buying and trading companies under like without even like do you are you active on YouTube at all? Like do you watch like YouTube videos and stuff?
A bit, yeah.
Do you know about Rooster Teeth?
I've heard of them.
Well, Rooster Teeth was started in I think 2007 or 2007, something like that. It was a long time
Yeah,
ago.
they've been around.
Yeah,
They've
they've
been
been around
around.
for a while. Um, apparently, they're owned by AT&T.
Yeah, I think I heard something about that, and frankly, it doesn't surprise me.
But it's not like direct. Like it's not like AT&T was like, "Hey, we're gonna buy Rooster Teeth." It was, uh, Rooster Teeth was bought by a company, and then that company was bought by another company, and
Yep.
then that company was like merged with a company that was already owned by AT&T.
Yeah.
And that just like blows my mind.
Yeah, like when you trace the routes of like this corporate consolidation, it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Like I just had an example off the damn it.
Have you
Um
have you seen
oh
the
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, have you seen the 10 food companies that like own
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much everything?
Yeah, it's like that web where you
Everything.
have a few companies around the perimeter, and then going in towards the center of the picture, it's this web of all these different brands that are owned
Yep.
by each other, and you get to the top, and it's like half a dozen companies. And it's kind of an interesting. I don't want to get super political or anything, but like you see people arguing about like Venezuela, for example, like their grocery stores all have the same, like the shelves.
The
It's just
same
you have
stuff.
choice of one brand,
Yeah.
but we have the same problem. It just doesn't look that way.
I
I mean, you.
There was a couple years ago, maybe it was just last year. There was this politician from like Maine or something, and he went on a trip to Iceland,
Mm,
and he was walking through the store, and it was a nice clean store, but each of the rows was like it only had one brand of a bunch of the same stuff.
that's
And
interesting.
he was like, this is what socialism would bring to the United States, a lack
Yeah,
of choice. And I retweeted that and responded with that food chart, and I was like, you don't have that
I
many
think I saw that.
choices. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Everything
it's
is owned by Pepsi and
yeah.
Coca-Cola and Kellogg's and
I mean, yeah.
Mars.
You go out to eat, and you ask, hey, what do you guys have for soda? Pepsi products.
Yeah, right. and like it even goes like as far as into like water. Like Coca-Cola owns like four different water brands, and they're
Yeah,
all considered to be competitors of one another
right,
because they started as competitors. They started as their own individual brands, with the exception of Dasani.
right.
And then Dasani was just like, "Hey, these guys are being problematic, so Coca-Cola, you should buy them." And then Coke did,
Yeah,
and like it's not even just like food. Like, let me see. Oh yeah, so, Nestle owns Gerber.
Yep, that's a good example.
Which Gerber also has that child life insurance thing, which is like how Nestle is in my mind
Wait,
chocolate
what?
milk
They own
powder.
it? What?
Like, there's that stupid rabbit that keeps drinking
Jesus
chocolate milk.
Christ!
And
Oh my God!
how do they sell life insurance?
Life insurance. All right, that might be the dumbest thing I've heard today. I'll give you actually a really scary example. So not many, I mean, some people know this, but not everybody knows that the internet, people will refer to it as this very like nebulous thing, like the cloud.
Right.
But the reality is it's actually very grounded. The way that you connect to other continents, there are these giant cables underwater that run under the ocean. And let me actually pull up a map.
Is that real?
Yeah. So
Seriously?
I'll send this in the yeah. So
what?
No, yeah. So they're giant cables that run under the ocean, and that's how the world is connected. And so to get to my point, most of them are owned by like half a dozen companies, and you can probably just guess off the top of your head which companies those are. Just give it a shot. Guess.
I mean, like web providers. I imagine that like Verizon is probably up there.
They probably own some, but I'll go ahead and give you the answer. Microsoft, Amazon. Yep, Amazon. They have. They're actually a very large web provider through their company AWS, Amazon Web Services. They are very, very.
Well, I didn't know that was a thing.
No, yeah, that's like their main business. Is like they have their own certification programs for their infrastructure, and what they do is actually quite incredible, and I'll get into that in a second. But Huawei, that Chinese company that everyone hates, they own a ton of those cables.
Wow.
Interestingly, they don't own any around the United States. But if you go to submarinecablemap.com, like it shows you all the cables, and you can click on them, and it shows you what is owned by who.
There will be a link to this in the description for anyone who's interested in checking it out. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm astonished. Like, and how do these, like, are they just like big cables that just go across the ocean floor?
So, yes, basically it uses it uses fiber optics, which basically means there's a really clear fiber and it sends a light through, and that's how it transmits data. Right. What's really impressive is that it transmits it across the entire Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, that's
like tens of thousands of miles. Apparently, they actually had problems with sharks biting on these, so they started shielding them. But it's super cool. I actually worked for an IT company at one point, and we were looking at this stuff, trying to figure out. We were going to. I probably can't talk about it, actually. I'm under NDA. But for reasons, we were looking into like where the best location for these cables was, and you'll see like a lot of them land in New York and New Jersey, and the rest pretty much land in Florida.
Yeah, Florida, and then on the West Coast, they pretty evenly spaced around the West Coast, except for like like Colorado and Washington for whatever reason.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So like these are owned by a pretty small selection of companies, but the difference is that we don't really have a choice in that. Shut the hell up.
So
these are owned by like, I don't know, maybe a dozen companies at most, but we don't have a choice. Like, this isn't something like a mom and pop shop can go invest in underwater cables.
Yeah.
You pretty much are stuck. It's like space travel. Like, you pretty much have like the government and SpaceX.
Right.
And whatever other large companies decide to throw billions of dollars into it. And that's the cost of entry for these things, unfortunately.
It's really interesting because you see most of it is stuff that is like around like coasts of these countries.
Yeah.
Brazil has a crazy amount of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot, obviously, that surround the Caribbean, and that makes sense. There's
Mm-hmm.
a strangely heavy number of ones in Great Britain. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess there are a lot of like separate islands for that.
So one
Um,
thing I want to draw your attention to, if you look right around the middle of the Atlantic, there's a series of islands called the Azores, and they have their own line that
huh.
just goes in a loop from Florida across to Europe, and just one line for their own connection. And like that's just islands, and they
Oh
brought a
yeah, look at
cable out
that.
there.
That's so funny. It's just in like a little loop.
Yeah.
Why is
So let me
that?
ask you a question. How would you have guessed the internet worked if I hadn't told you that these cables existed?
I would have said that everything is just wireless. You know, it's the
Like
internet.
satellite?
I thought that it was like the cloud. You know, like
Yeah,
everything
it's
just
just the
gets like
cloud.
everything just gets thrown onto the internet, and that goes onto like a huge, massive underground server somewhere, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
accessible. But
No, it's really not. It's
wow.
um, it's kind of interesting to me that like the tech world has this sort of aura of like mystique around it. Like you call it the
Everything's
cloud,
magic.
but I've had opportunity to tour in data centers,
Uh huh.
and you associate cloud, it's the cloud. It's very light and fluffy and it floats. It's like thousands of pounds of servers in giant steel cabinets and giant batteries and cooling mechanisms, and the entire building is like designed to route cold air around. So the reality is it's actually pretty fucking heavy. I don't think
Yeah.
it's not really a cloud. Um, but
Wow.
it's really accessible. It's not like this mysterious thing.
Uh huh.
So it
Huh.
always confuses me when people kind of regard it that way. Anyway,
That's really crazy, and it's interesting to see like which parts have such like heavy numbers of like contact points or whatever. Um,
yeah,
uh, One of them, namely, is Bulgaria to Georgia. There's a line between Bulgaria and Georgia
let me take a look.
through the Black Sea, and
Yeah,
that's
yep,
that's weird because it's like right in the center of like where like Eastern Europe. It's like
yeah,
and then like right there, it's just it's interesting, and then the Mediterranean is just filled with cables,
yeah. Of course, of course.
and that's and like I could understand like I just noticed that there is no cable going from Sicily to Italy. Oh wait, no, there is.
There
It's
is
like
one.
it's like to northern Italy.
Yeah.
That's really strange. And
So the global, sorry to interrupt, the global kind of political implications of a lot of this stuff is actually pretty interesting because you can have countries that are not huge fans of each other. Like, my guess is I mean, just off the top of my head,
hmm
the reason that that cable is going from Bulgaria to Georgia through the Black Sea is probably because they weren't allowed to have land routes going through
Yeah,
Turkey
yeah,
or
that makes sense. And like also with Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, like they're clearly not touching Iran. Like they're none of those wires are going to
yeah.
Iran. But Iran has plenty on their southern coast that go to
Yep.
Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and
Hmm.
Iraq, and that's fascinating. I had no idea that that was a thing. Please,
Yeah.
everyone listening, go check that out because it's gonna blow your mind.
It really does. Like, you want to talk about giant corporations who have like control over the entire world? This is about as big corporation as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, and literally, like, talk about control over the world. Like, everything's dependent on the internet nowadays.
Right. And so, I mean, I would say the only saving grace is that it's very, very redundant. Like, the
Yeah.
internet is designed around no single point of failure.
Huh.
Um, so if one of these cables gets cut, as actually does happen from time to time, it turns
Right.
out it's a fairly common terror attack
Oh.
to just cut these cables.
Hmm.
People have been caught doing it a couple of years ago, I remember a story about some Russian military vessels drifting around some pretty important cables. Um, and but it's very redundant. There's probably what 24 cables going across the Atlantic just to Europe.
And that's really interesting. So if I'm looking at this website right now, and I'm like clicking on these things, or if I say I send an email to someone in England,
mm-hmm.
is that information being sent through those cables? Is that how that's working?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
You're like blowing my mind right now, dude.
I know, right?
I legitimately thought that it was all like it gets tossed up in the air and then the computer across the ocean catches it.
Like I said, man, it's really not magic. They're not like Galen the Wizard. They're engineers. Right. They don't have they might have a long flowing white beard, but it's not because they have like magic powers. Like people just figured this out. You have a light on one end and a really clear cable. And the light, it turns on and off, and those are zeros and ones. Oh, and that's binary. And you send binary. That over. I mean, that's how all of it works. That's how Wi-Fi works with the radio waves. And fundamentally, by the way, just as an aside, that's basically just an electromagnet. Like if you took a nail and then wrapped a wire around it and then attached a battery to both ends, you've created your Wi-Fi antenna, essentially.
Wow.
And so what all it's doing is just zeros and ones. It's just transmitting that data. I mean, obviously that's oversimplified, but it like I said, man, just it's really not magic.
And these cables are able to send information from the millions of people in the United States to the other side of the ocean in instant.
So that's what's great about fiber optics is that it travels at the speed of light.
Oh, okay.
Which is why it's important. Yeah, to answer your question. What's important about that is that the cables have to have a very high degree of integrity. Like if you have a little flaw somewhere in this 25,000 miles of clear cable, it's going to disrupt the signal.
Right.
In the same way that I don't know. I can't think of an example. If there's a tree blocking the sun, you can't see the sun as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's a good example.
It's the same thing, and that's a problem when you have 8 billion people trying to talk to each other,
right.
and you have a little scratch somewhere. Like you can't have that.
Right.
And obviously this isn't just exclusive to underwater cables. This is used in data centers all the time. Like if you have Verizon Fios, for example. Spoiler alert, Fios stands for fiber optics.
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah.
Because we got Fios installed in my house last summer, and the guy was explaining the whole thing.
Yeah, so you have a little piece of the internet, of these underwater cables going into your home.
That's so wild. I do notice on here that there is one cable in particular that goes down from New Jersey to Florida. Now, is there a? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That was my sister.
Thought it was a dog.
Yeah. I'll make sure that she hears that. I see this cable that goes from New Jersey to Florida. Is there a reason that that's not over land, or is it just like for convenience?
I have no fucking idea.
It's just there.
Yeah, I really don't know. My guess is possibly redundancy, or it's just like it relays in Florida. Because here's the thing. As pure as those cables can be, the light doesn't need to be repeated after a while. You need to kind of re-amplify it.
That makes sense.
You interpret the light signal, and then you basically just send it out again, but brighter.
Yeah.
So that could be what's happening there.
I clicked on it. It says that it's GlobeNet, and that it goes from this spot in New Jersey down to Florida, and then that spot branches out into Venezuela and Colombia, or if you take the other route, it takes you to Bermuda, and then that one goes all the way to to Brazil, and then I guess that's another repeater that goes into southern Brazil.
Yeah, I'm really not sure, to be honest. Networking has never been my strong suit as a system administrator, so I'm not really qualified to talk about the giant cables that connect everybody on the planet.
That's still really crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't really have an answer to your question, but I'm sure.
Well, I'm glad to see that the illusion of corporate choice is present in not only grocery stores but also global networking.
Yeah, I guarantee you, like that company that you just mentioned, GlobalNet, they're not an independent company. No chance.
Be surprised. That's crazy. Well, I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Yeah, man, this has been great.
Is there anything that you'd like to give a shout out to or promote? You can just, go ahead.
Yeah.
This is your time to shine.
Okay. If you're interested in any kind of software development or web development or any kind of infrastructure, any kind of technical solution at all, check out my website, my company website at ineptitech.com. Or if you just want to hire me personally, my personal website is samarov.me, SAMAROV.me. I'm basically a wizard and I can do anything.
Yes, I can vouch for that. All of those links to everything will be in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify. There will be a description on the podcast, and all the information will be on there. Sean, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, man, it's been fantastic. Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to putting this out there. I think a lot of people will find this really entertaining and informative.
I hope so.
Thank you, everybody, so much for listening or watching or whatever. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you want more, every Sunday at 10 a.m. is when these podcasts are going to be uploaded. Thank you all again for listening.